The wind scraped across Hollow Creek like a dry whisper, stirring dust into brittle spirals that danced between the sun-bleached bones of wagon wheels and warped porch planks. It was the kind of wind that didn't bring rain, only the scent of rust, sweat, and far-off fires. Along the town's crooked edge, where fences slumped and pigs grunted in their muddy kingdom, she lay, half buried in straw and slop, hair matted, skin blistered. Clara May. No one called her by name anymore. Around the saloon, they just referred to her as the So Girl, or that one in the pen. She'd been there for days now. How many? No one really kept track. She never spoke. Not that anyone cared to listen. Her eyes fluttered under the shadow of a bruised brow, lashes stuck together with grime. She smelled like waste and shame. Laughter bubbled from the saloon porch. Reckon she's part pig by now. Someone snorted, and a chorus of chuckles rose in reply. Could hose her down, or just wait till the rain comes. Oh wait, this hellhole ain't seen a drop in months. Another voice added, she earned it. You hear what she did. Heard she poisoned her daddy's stew and ran off with a ranch hand. Lies, came a quieter voice, quickly drowned by louder ones. The swing doors slapped open. A newcomer stepped in. Jonah crossed road and without fanfare, a silhouette beneath a wide-brimmed hat and an oilskin duster stiff with dust. He dismounted with a grunt, his boots hitting the packed earth with the weight of years. He was an old man, lean, sinewed like a desert tree, face furrowed deep with lines that had little to do with age and everything to do with memory. His horse, a scarred gelding the color of ash, waited quietly as Jonah tied the reins to a post and looked around. Nobody greeted him. That was fine. He preferred the silence. Inside the saloon, smoke and sweat mingled under a low ceiling. Cards slapped tables, a piano creaked in the corner, and men with cracked knuckles nursed drinks like they were afraid to finish them. Jonah walked to the bar, each step slow but certain. Whiskey, he said, voice like gravel. The bartender poured without asking questions. Jonah didn't sip. He stared at the mirror behind the bottles, watching the room in reverse. She yours? A drunk asked, nodding toward the window where Clara's form could just barely be seen beyond the fence. Jonah didn't answer. Hell, we figured maybe she's got a curse on her. Bad things happen when she shows up. Strange fires, droughts, like the earth itself won't take her back. Shut up, Bill, the bartender muttered, wiping glasses. But Bill wasn't finished. Ain't natural, the way she just showed up here months ago, talking nonsense about dead folks in the canyons. Now she don't talk at all. Jonah finished his drink, slid the glass back. She have a name? Used to. Clara May Cartwright, from up by Blue Ridge. But she ain't been that girl for a long time. Jonah turned toward the window. The pigs had backed off, clustered to the far corner of the pen. Clara was shifting now, weak arms trying to lift herself. She failed and collapsed back into the filth. Without another word, he stepped out. The sun hit him like a slap. He adjusted his hat and walked down the saloon steps, past men who muttered, but made no move to stop him. The pigs snorted and shuffled as he unlatched the gate. Clara stirred again. Her lips moved. Maybe a word. Maybe just breath. He knelt beside her, eyes narrowing. Her face was young beneath the grime, but something in it looked old. Older than anything he'd seen on the trail. Wounded deep. Not just bruised, but hollowed. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a rolled wool blanket, worn but clean. Slowly, he unfolded it and laid it over her. Her eyes flickered open, pale and unfocused. She flinched when the blanket touched her, but didn't pull away. You're safe now, he said quietly. She blinked. No tears, just confusion. He stood, watched the town watching him. From the saloon porch, Bill spat into the dust. You gonna adopt her, mister? Jonah didn't answer. He walked back to his horse, untied the reins. Before mounting, he turned to the bartender still standing in the doorway. She needs food, water, a bath, not laughter. The bartender looked down, nodded once. Jonah rode to the livery, his shadow long against the late afternoon light. Behind him, the girl in the pig pen slept under a blanket that didn't belong to her, and for the first time in days, no one laughed. And though the wind still carried dust and heat and broken dreams, something in it had changed, like a breath held between storms. By morning, the pigs kept their distance. Clara sat upright against the split-rail fence, the wool blanket drawn tight around her shoulders, though the rising sun already pushed heat into her skin. Her hair was no less tangled, her face no less grimy, but her eyes had cleared. They were watching now, slowly, warily, as if she were relearning the shape of the world. A tin plate sat beside her, the remains of bread and beans half-eaten. Someone had brought it, though no one had claimed the kindness. She hadn't spoken a word, not since that man had come, not since the blanket. From inside the saloon, the talk had shifted. "She's still out there," Bill muttered, lifting the curtain with 2 fingers, "acting like she's somebody again." "She was never somebody," came a voice from deeper in the room. But the bartender said nothing. He kept polishing glasses, eyes flicking to the door as if waiting for someone. Jonah Cross had taken a room upstairs, asked for nothing more than quiet and hot water. The townsfolk didn't question it. Something about the way he moved, like a man who had nothing left to prove, had a way of silencing questions. Later that morning, Clara stood. Her legs trembled, but she stayed upright. The blanket fell away, and beneath it, her dress clung to her frame like old parchment, thin, torn, barely decent. She clutched the fabric at her chest and walked unsteadily toward the pump behind the general store. People watched, some from behind curtains, some from porches, but none of them helped. Jonah saw her from his window. She moved like a memory, fragile and echoing, but there was something inside her now, just under the surface. Not strength exactly, not yet, but a will that hadn't been there before. She worked the pump slowly. Water splashed over her hands, her wrists, her face. She gasped when the cold hit her skin, then did it again, scrubbing at the filth, the crusted remnants of days spent lying in straw and shame. "Town's gone soft," someone muttered nearby. "She's still dangerous," said another. "Her kind always is. Quiet ones. Ain't right in the head." Jonah came down the stairs before they could finish. His boots hit the wood with finality. He walked past the muttering men and out into the light. She didn't see him approach until he was nearly beside her. "You'll catch fever scrubbing like that," he said. She froze, arms dripping. Her lips parted. Words gathered, brittle from disuse. She began, then shook her head. "No, I won't." "You remember me?" She glanced at him. "You gave me the blanket." "That's right." A silence stretched between them, held not by awkwardness, but by the simple weight of things that didn't need saying. "I didn't ask for help," she said finally. "You didn't need to." She looked away, jaw tightening. "They think I'm mad." "Are you?" Clara met his eyes then, and for a moment, the hurt in her gaze didn't seem like weakness. It looked ancient, carved deep like rock worn by wind. "No," she whispered. "I remember everything." He waited. She wiped her hands on her skirt, then folded her arms over her chest. "They came for us in the dark. We lived near the ridge, Cartwright Ranch, it used to be called. My father wouldn't pay. Said he wouldn't be bent by outlaws. So they made an example of us." Jonah's jaw shifted, but he said nothing. "They slit my brother's throat first. He was 12. My mother." She stopped, swallowed hard. "I hid in the grain bin. Didn't come out till morning. The house was still smoking." She looked up at him now, face bare, voice steady. Their leader had a black tooth. Called himself Jesse Scarrow. The name settled in the air like a dropped anvil. Jonah nodded once. "I've heard it. I walked 3 days. Ended up here." She motioned vaguely toward the saloon. Started saying their names. Screaming sometimes. People didn't like that. They stopped hearing me. Threw me out. I think I slept behind every building in this town before I ended up in that pig pen. The pump creaked in the wind. Jonah looked toward the canyon beyond the town. "Scarrow rides this way sometimes. Him and his men. They bleed Hollow Creek like ticks on a dog." "I know," she said. "They come for money. Threats. And when that don't work, they take girls." Jonah looked at her. "You want to run?" Clara's answer was immediate. "No." A moment passed. Then she added, "Not anymore." He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for her to say that. Back in the saloon, someone shouted. Boots hit the floor. Then the sound of hooves, dozens. Dust rose down the main road like a rising tide. Jonah turned. So did Clara. A man on horseback led the procession. His hat sat crooked on his head, and his smile revealed the unmistakable glint of a rotten black tooth. His gang spilled into the street behind him, laughing, jeering, tossing bottles. Guns gleamed at their hips. Clara went pale. That's him, she breathed. That's Jesse Scarrow. Jonah didn't blink. I figured he'd look taller, he said. Clara looked at him, startled. You knew he was coming. I suspected. You're not afraid. I've seen worse. The riders came closer. Jesse's voice carried now, taunting oily. Where's my welcome, Hollow Creek? Don't tell me you forgot our little agreement. He laughed. His gang laughed with him. Jonah watched, his hand resting lightly on his belt, near a revolver, so worn it looked like it had stories of its own. Clara gripped the edge of the water pump, her fingers white. What are you going to do? She asked. He looked down at her. Wait, he said. And remember. Then he turned, walking toward the edge of the street, dust curling at his boots like smoke before a fire. The gang poured into Hollow Creek like a plague of flies. 20, maybe more, faces scorched by the sun, mouths full of laughter that had no joy in it. Their horses were lean and angry, just like their riders, and their guns hung low, polished like pride. Jesse Scarrow rode at the head, boots dangling lazily from the sides of his gray stallion. He wore a red coat, patched at the elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded a face carved from cruelty. His eyes were wolfish, his smile split by a single rotted tooth blacker than coal. The mark of him. No one who'd ever seen it forgot. He reined his horse in at the center of town and tipped his hat in a mock bow. Well, hellfire, if it ain't just as I remember it. Hollow Creek, you sweet old barnacle, he drawled, grinning wide. And here I thought you'd be tired of me by now. Doors stayed shut. Windows darkened. The only sound was the creak of saddle leather and the soft clink of iron. Behind Jesse, his second-in-command, a wiry man with a scar that split his lip, spat into the dirt and barked. Y'all deaf or just plain disrespectful? Scarrow lifted a hand. Easy, Rafe. They're just shy. Ain't that right, folks? He turned slowly in the saddle, voice rising. We're just here for our usual donation. Fair trade, really. We keep the peace. You keep breathing. A door cracked open. Old McGraw, the storekeep, stepped out, hat in hand. His eyes didn't rise higher than Jesse's boots. We're still gathering, Mr. Scarrow. Last month hit hard. Droughts thinning the herds. Is that so? Jesse's voice cooled. Now see, that don't sound like gratitude. That sounds like a problem. He dismounted in one smooth motion, boots striking the ground with a thud. His hand rested lightly on the revolver at his hip. Jonah stood near the pump, arms crossed, hat pulled low. He hadn't moved since the riders arrived. Clara stood a few paces behind him, stiff as fence-post wire. Jesse noticed him then. Well, he said, stepping forward. Who's this? Didn't know Hollow Creek had hired itself a scarecrow. Jonah didn't answer. Jesse tilted his head. You deaf, old man. Jonah raised his eyes, calm and clear. Just tired of talking to insects. A low whistle passed through the gang. A few chuckled, but it was nervous. Jesse's grin didn't falter, though the line of his jaw tensed. I don't believe we've been introduced, Jesse said. I'm the law in these parts. You ain't the law, Jonah said. You're a shadow pretending to be thunder. Clara gasped behind him, but Jesse just laughed, though it rang brittle. Well, listen to this poetic bastard. Where'd they dig you up, Grandpa? Jonah stepped forward now, slow and steady. I'm just passing through. Saw something broken and thought I'd fix it. Jesse's eyes flicked past him to Clara. Oh, he said slowly. That's what this is about. The girl. He took a step closer to her, and in that moment Clara flinched. Her hands twitched toward the folds of her skirt, where she held the edge of the blanket still wrapped around her. I remember you, Jesse said, voice low and oily. You're the little rabbit that bolted from Blue Ridge. You made quite a mess. Claire's voice trembled, but it came. You killed them. He blinked. Darlin', I've killed a lot of folks. Gonna have to be more specific. Jonah moved then, not fast, but sharp enough that Jesse noticed. His hand drifted to his own revolver. Don't, Jonah said. Not yet. Rafe stepped forward, emboldened. What are you gonna do, old man? Shoot all of us? Maybe, Jonah said, eyes never leaving Jesse. But I only need to shoot one. Jesse narrowed his eyes. Something shifted behind his smile. Recognition, or perhaps unease. You got a name, mister? Jonah didn't answer. Instead, he asked, What's your tax today? Jesse blinked, caught off guard. Same as always. $20 per roof. Or one girl. Whichever's cheaper. Jonah nodded once. Thought so. Then he turned and walked away. Past Clara, past the general store, into the shadows of the livery. He didn't look back. Clara watched him go, heart thudding against her ribs. She couldn't read his face, but something about his walk, measured, silent, told her this wasn't retreat. It was something colder, older. Jesse glanced around, suddenly less amused. That man's got nerve. Reckon he needs reminding what happens to those who cross me. He looked back at Clara. You sticking with him, sweetheart? You think he's gonna keep you safe? Clara didn't answer. Her mouth was dry. But she didn't run. She didn't look away. Jesse stared at her for a moment longer, then turned on his heel. Fine, he said. We'll be back tomorrow. And we'll collect. One way or another. He mounted his horse in one swift movement, then signaled his gang. With a kick of hooves and a trail of laughter, they rode back out of town, a storm held in check by the promise of return. When they were gone, Hollow Creek exhaled. The silence afterward was not peace. It was dread. Clara stood alone in the dust, staring toward the livery, where Jonah had vanished. She didn't know what he was planning, but whatever it was, he wasn't waiting for the outlaws to come back unchallenged. And neither was she. The livery stank of horses and old hay, thick with the scent of sweat and gun oil. Jonah stood in the far stall, sleeves rolled up, hands methodically cleaning the revolver he hadn't drawn in years. Not since Colorado. Not since the blood on the snow and the boy with no name. He held each piece like it was holy. Not reverent, just exact. The way a man handles tools when he knows they don't forgive mistakes. The cylinder clicked back into place with a finality that echoed off the wood walls. Clara stepped into the doorway, hesitant. Light carved a line across her face. She looked cleaner now. Not whole. Not yet, but no longer a ghost. Her hair was damp, combed, pulled back with a ribbon someone had left on her food plate. The blanket still hung from her shoulders like armor. You gonna tell me who you really are? She asked softly. Jonah didn't look up. You already know. I don't. You do. You just haven't let yourself believe it yet. She took a step closer. You knew Jesse's name before I said it. You weren't surprised when he rode in. You weren't scared. And that gun of yours, it doesn't look like it's gathered dust. Jonah glanced at her then, and for the first time, she saw it. Not just the age in his eyes, but the depth, like staring into a canyon carved by time, and things too terrible to speak aloud. They used to call me the Gray Shadow, he said. Not because I was fast. Because I didn't miss. Clara's breath caught. I was a bounty man once. Worked the frontier from Cheyenne to Sonora. Took down murderers, thieves, warlords. Anyone with a price and blood on their hands. But after a while, the blood started sticking to mine. You quit. I disappeared. Clara leaned against the post, voice quiet. Why now? Jonah looked back to his weapon. Because Jesse Scarrow's name was on a list I never got to finish. And because a girl was sleeping in a pig pen, and no one else gave a damn. The wind outside shifted. Dust swept past the open doors. They'll come tomorrow, Clara said. You can't kill them all. Jonah stood, slid the revolver into the holster with practiced ease. Maybe not, but I can kill Jesse. Clara's voice trembled with something between fear and awe. That'll just bring more. Maybe. But Hollow Creek deserves to see one evil end. Might give them the spine to stand against the next. A silence passed. Then Jonah asked, "You still afraid?" She shook her head slowly. "I was, but not anymore." He nodded. "Then we start tonight." They gathered supplies from the general store: rope, lantern oil, nails. The townsfolk didn't ask questions, not out loud, but they watched uneasy, as the girl they'd laughed at and the stranger with the haunted eyes moved through the town with quiet purpose. As night fell, Jonah marked the street with slow calculation, measuring steps, angles, fields of fire. He placed barrels behind troughs, stacked crates just so, not for defense, for cover. 4 traps. Clara helped without complaint. She had no skill in gunfighting, but she listened well. When Jonah told her to mark the saloon's upper window with white chalk, she did. When he showed her how to prime a Molotov from old rye whiskey, her hands didn't shake. At the well's edge, he showed her how to load a spare pistol. She eyed it. "I don't know if I can shoot a man." Jonah looked at her. "Then don't aim at the man. Aim at the choice he made." Midnight settled like a shroud. Hollow Creek fell silent, save for the occasional creak of old wood and the restless shuffle of pigs. Clara sat on the church steps, watching the moon hang low over the canyon. Jonah stood nearby, leaning against a post, his silhouette etched in silver light. "I was 13 when they came," she said. "I remember the sound of my brother's voice. Just before it stopped, he called my name." Jonah didn't speak. "I wanted to scream," she continued, "but I didn't. I stayed hidden. And afterward, I hated myself for surviving." "Surviving isn't shame," Jonah said. "It's strategy. You stayed breathing. That's how we win now." She nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll come at dawn?" "Outlaws love spectacle," Jonah said. "They'll come when the light's just high enough to show their shadows." The stars wheeled above them, uncaring. Jonah moved to stand beside her. "You ever hear what the Lakota say about the wind?" She shook her head. "They say the wind's got memory, carries the voices of those who died too soon." Clara looked at him. "What do you think it's saying now?" He listened for a moment, eyes narrowed at the canyon's edge. "It's waiting," he said, "just like us." Then he stepped away, into the dark, disappearing without a sound. Clara watched the horizon, her hand resting on the pistol tucked beneath the folds of the blanket. Tomorrow would come. The blood would come with it. But tonight, the town breathed with quiet defiance. And somewhere in the stillness, a shadow named Cross prepared to make his final mark. The dawn came pale and brittle, as if the sun itself were wary of what it might reveal. Hollow Creek was silent, too silent, but the air thrummed with tension. The wind had died. Even the pigs stayed still. Then came the hoofbeats. Jesse Scarrow led the gang down the ridge trail like a parade marshal in hell. Red coat snapping in the breeze, pistol gleaming on his hip. Behind him rode 19 men, and 2 boys too young to understand the price of following monsters. Their laughter echoed down the narrow canyon, a sound that made the bones of the town ache. The outlaws passed the first row of houses without resistance. Doors stayed bolted, curtains pulled taut. It looked the same as yesterday, but the stillness had changed. Jesse's smile thinned. "Odd," he muttered to Rafe. "Too quiet." The saloon stood empty, swinging doors yawning open to the breeze. Jesse sniffed the air. Whiskey, smoke, rope oil. He dismounted and walked up the main drag alone, boot heels thudding in the silence. One by one, the others followed, spreading out with the loose confidence of men unafraid. He stopped before the church, narrowed his eyes at the white chalk mark on the saloon's upper window. That's when the first bullet hit. It wasn't loud, not at first. A single crack, distant. One of Jesse's men collapsed in the dust, shot clean through the eye. Before the body hit the ground, a second shot rang out from behind the water trough. Then another. Screams erupted. Jonah Cross stood at the center of it all, unmoving, revolver in hand. His coat flapped as he stepped into the open, firing with a cold precision that spoke of years carved by war. He wasn't fast. He didn't need to be. His bullets never missed. Men scattered, yelling. Some ducked behind barrels, others ran for higher ground. Rafe fired wild and fell back, dragging one of the boys with him. Jesse stood rooted, blinking in disbelief as the gray shadow painted the dirt red. Then came fire. Clara, atop the general store roof, lit the Molotov and flung it toward the horse trough. Flames burst skyward, casting the street in sudden orange. The gang panicked, horses rearing, men cursing. One tried to run. Jonah put him down with a shot to the leg, then walked past him like smoke. Jesse regained his senses and shouted orders. Circle left. Kill the old man. Bring me the girl. Rafe rallied the flank. 3 men charging with rifles raised. Jonah ducked behind a crate, waited, then stepped out and fired twice. 2 fell. The third hesitated, and Clara's shot from the rooftop caught him in the gut. The boy screamed, dropped his weapon, and ran. The sun set slow over Hollow Creek, laying a long red hush across the town, like a wound yet to scab. Smoke still curled from the remains of the saloon roof. Horses, skittish from gunfire and blood, pawed the dirt in nervous circles. But the silence had changed. It wasn't fear now. It was waiting. Jonah Cross had returned before nightfall. He came on foot, blood on his sleeve and dust in his beard, walking like a man with weight in every step. His revolver rode at his side, but his eyes did more damage. Dark, flat, unreadable. The kind of eyes that remember too much. Clara saw him from the boarding house porch, and something inside her caught. She wasn't afraid anymore. But she didn't breathe until he stopped in front of her. They're coming, he said. She didn't ask how he knew. Some men could feel trouble before it had a name. Jonah Cross had been made of it. How many? She asked. Enough. Jesse wasn't the last scarrow. He had a brother, Archer. Meaner, smarter. I saw the dust trail half a day out. 14 riders, maybe more. The townsfolk gathered behind her, faces pinched with fear and fatigue. Old Eli, the blacksmith, still had soot in his beard. The preacher stood with a shotgun in hand and prayer on his lips. They'd buried 5 townsmen and 3 outlaws. The soil wasn't dry yet. We can't run, Clara said. No, Jonah agreed. But we can finish it. A murmur moved through the group. Someone asked if they were to fight again. Someone else asked if they even could. Jonah didn't answer either question with words. He walked to the edge of the square, bent down, and drew a line in the dust with his boot heel. They cross this line, he said. They declare war. That's their choice. He turned to the sheriff. Get the people inside. Board the windows. Use the stables for fallback. I'll hold the street. Clara stepped forward. Not alone. Jonah looked at her, eyes narrowed. You've done enough. No, she said. You taught me to stand. Now let me. He didn't nod, didn't smile, but he handed her a second revolver. The town braced. That night, lanterns were snuffed early. Guns were loaded by calloused hands that had once only known plows and branding irons. The children slept under church pews. Mothers whispered lullabies they barely remembered. And just before midnight, Archer Scarrow arrived. He didn't ride into town like Jesse. No red coat, no grin. Just a tall man in a long black duster with cold eyes and a voice that didn't need volume. Jonah Cross, he called from the ridge. Step out. Let's finish this proper. Jonah did. He stood at the center of the main street, arms loose, coat open. I killed your brother, he said. He begged near the end. Thought you should know. Archer didn't flinch. He was a fool. Never knew how to run a crew. I do. You've got 2 minutes to pray, Cross. Then you die. You cross this line, Jonah said. You don't leave. Archer smiled, small and hard. Then he raised a hand, and the rider surged. Gunfire cracked the night open. Clara was on the saloon balcony, firing slow and steady. Jonah dropped 3 riders in the first 10 seconds. The townsfolk returned fire from behind barrels and hay bales. The Scarrow gang was fast, but not prepared. They expected fear, not fire. One man screamed, dragged from his horse by a tripwire strung across the smithy wall. Another fell with a wet thump, head struck clean by a shot from the preacher's window. Jonah moved like smoke, calculated, exact. Bullets chased his shadow, but never caught it. Then Clara screamed. A rider had slipped past, looped behind the saloon, and come up the back stair. Jonah turned just in time to see the man grab her by the throat, gun raised. Jonah didn't hesitate. He fired once. The shot went wide, struck the beam above, but it made the man flinch. Clara took that second, drove her elbow back, twisted free, and fired point-blank. The rider dropped, and Clara stared at the smoking pistol in her hand like it wasn't real. She looked down at Jonah. He gave her a nod. Then Archer charged. He rode straight down the middle, both pistols blazing. Jonah ducked, rolled behind a water barrel, fired twice. One struck Archer's leg. The horse reared. He fell, hit the ground hard, and rolled to his feet. They were face to face now. "You're slower than I heard," Archer snarled. "I'm older than you guessed," Jonah replied. They circled, the last two men standing in the middle of a town that held its breath. The gunfight paused as if time itself respected what was coming. Archer drew. Jonah didn't. Not right away. He waited. Half a second more than a man should. Long enough for Archer to think he'd won. Then he moved. Fast. Faster than age should allow. His shot punched into Archer's chest, then another just beneath the first. Archer dropped to his knees, eyes wide with betrayal, as if death had broken a deal. Jonah walked to him slow, looked him in the eye. "It ends here," he said. And it did. The rest of the gang broke and ran. None stayed to collect their dead. By morning, Hollow Creek was quiet again, but not the same. Not afraid. Not broken. Jonah stood at the edge of the churchyard as the sun rose, watching the shadows pull back from the graves. Clara stood beside him, tired but whole. "You'll leave now," she said. "I have to. There's more names." He nodded. She hesitated, then asked, "Will you come back?" Jonah looked out toward the horizon, where the sky met the dust. "When it's done." She didn't ask when that might be. He wouldn't lie. She didn't need hope built on sand. He turned to go, boots crunching gravel, coat lifting in the wind. She watched until he was gone. Later, they would tell stories in Hollow Creek, of the girl with a gun and the man with a shadow for a name, of the night fire swallowed fear and the morning brought justice. They wouldn't all be true, but they'd be enough.